Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches. I'm Teniola Shoboale. On the program this week, Afghans flee Kabul following Taliban takeover as US President Joe Biden defends his decision to withdraw troops from the country. Following a rapid offensive, Taliban militants seized power in Afghanistan just 2 weeks before the US was set to complete its withdrawal after a two-decade war. The insurgents stormed across the country, capturing all major cities in a matter of days, as Afghan security forces, trained and equipped by the US and its allies, melted away. The Taliban leaders say they want peace and have promised women's rights, media freedom and amnesty for government officials.
2
days after completing their takeover of Afghanistan, Taliban militants gave their first press conference on Monday. They said they wanted peaceful relations with other countries and would respect the rights of women within the framework of Islamic law.
We are assuring the safety of all those who have worked with the United States and allied forces, whether as interpreters or any other field that they have worked with them. As for their talents and their skills, we do not want them to leave the country. We want them to serve their own homeland.
The Taliban announcements shot on details but suggesting a softer line than during their rule 20 years ago came as the United States and Western allies evacuate diplomats and civilians, the day after scenes of chaos at Kabul airport as Afghans thronged the airfield. On Monday, thousands of civilians desperate to flee thronged the runway, running alongside a moving military transporter aircraft as it prepared for takeoff. 7 people were reported to have died in total. Foreign powers are now assessing how to respond to the new rulers in Kabul. The European Union says it will have to engage with the Taliban to provide support to the Afghan people, even if it does not recognize them as legitimate rulers of the country.
We'll have to get in touch with the authorities in Kabul. The authorities in Kabul, wherever they are. The Taliban have won the war. So we will have to talk with them in order to engage in a dialogue as soon as necessary to prevent a humanitarian and a potential migratory disaster, but also a humanitarian crisis.
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres also called on the Security Council on Monday to guarantee that basic human rights will be respected in the country.
We must speak with one voice to uphold human rights in Afghanistan. I call upon the Taliban and all parties to respect and protect international humanitarian law and the rights and freedoms of all persons. We are receiving chilling reports of severe restrictions on human rights throughout the country. And I am particularly concerned by accounts of mounting human rights violations against the women and girls of Afghanistan who fear a return to the darkest days. The international community must unite to make sure that Afghanistan is never again used as a platform or safe haven for terrorist organizations. I appeal to the Security Council and the international community as a whole to stand together, to work together and act together, and use all tools at its disposal to suppress the global terrorist threat in Afghanistan and to guarantee that basic human rights will be respected.
U.S. forces are due to complete their withdrawal by the end of this month under the deal with the Taliban that hinged on their promise not to let Afghanistan be used for international terrorism. But many fear the Taliban's return and the vacuum left by the West's withdrawal will allow militants from Al-Qaeda and Islamic State to gain a foothold in Afghanistan, just 20 years after September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States.
In the last 2 decades, there have been no terrorist attack on Allied soil organized from Afghanistan. Those now taking power have the responsibility to ensure that international terrorists do not regain a foothold. Allies have the capabilities and the vigilance to address future terrorist threats from Afghanistan. But what we have seen in the last few weeks was a military and political collapse at a speed which had not been anticipated. Parts of the Afghan security forces fought bravely, but they were unable to secure the country, because ultimately the Afghan political leadership failed to stand up to the Taliban and to achieve the peaceful solution that Afghans desperately wanted. This failure of Afghan leadership led to the tragedy we are witnessing today.
Kabul was the last major city in the country to hold out against the Taliban offensive, which began months ago but accelerated in the space of days as they rapidly gained control of territories, shocking many. The militants say they would wait until foreign forces leave the country in the coming days before creating a new governance structure.
Facing criticism over the chaos, U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday defended the withdrawal of American troops. He blamed the Taliban's takeover on Afghan leaders who fled the country and a U.S.-trained Afghan army unwilling to fight.
President Joe Biden defended his administration on Monday night, saying that while the Taliban's rise was quicker than expected, Afghanistan's political leaders fled the country and left behind an Afghan army unwilling to fight the militant Islamists.
I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there. We were clear-eyed about the risks. We planned for every contingency, but I always promised the American people that I would be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves.
Joe Biden announced in April that he would be withdrawing the remaining 2,500 troops from the country as part of a 2020 deal made with the Taliban under former President Donald Trump. The decision to withdraw has sparked criticism after the Afghan government collapsed within days and the U.S. scrambled to evacuate American civilians and embassy employees from Kabul.
And now we see these heartbreaking pictures of people clinging to airplanes as they try to escape from the airport in Kabul. An unmitigated disaster. I know for a fact that the president's military leaders argued against this decision. I think the president felt strongly about this, obviously. He overruled his own military leaders to do it, and he owns it.
I have been, trying to reach out to many global leaders.
Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala Yousafzai, who survived being shot in the head by a Taliban gunman in Pakistan in 2012, says the U.S. president must take a bold step to protect the Afghan people.
Biden has a lot to do. President Biden has to take a bold step for the protection of the people of Afghanistan. What we must remember that in Afghanistan, it goes to back to four decades, right? So you don't even know where to start in history and who to start with and who to blame locally, regionally, globally. And the politics are just deep, multifaceted, complicated. But what is really important is that we remember that the people who have suffered the most are the innocent civilians of Afghanistan.
The political risks facing Biden from this decision, however, remain to be seen. Many Americans have expressed support for Trump and Biden's decision to leave Afghanistan, America's longest war. But many Afghans living in the U.S. fear for their family's safety back home.
I think it's heartbreaking in a lot of different ways. I think it's also very disappointing to see the withdrawal, execution of the withdrawal, and the fear of the unknown. What is going to happen to women and children, religious and ethnic minorities, when the hashtags and the trending die down?
There is a tragedy is happening in Afghanistan. And I wish the world community, and especially President Biden and his administration, make a better decision regarding to this situation and do not let the country being destroyed by these extremist groups.
The US-based Afghan coalition is trying to help Afghans file visa requests for their relatives stuck in the country, but they say there's little else the organization can do.
Over in the UK, also facing criticism, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson answered questions from MPs over the country's role in Afghanistan in an emergency House of Commons debate on the crisis.
Facing questions from MPs over the government's handling of the crisis, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the UK will honour its enduring commitment to the Afghan people.
About the situation in Afghanistan.
The Prime Minister adds that it's unrealistic to believe that the UK alone could have prevented the collapse of Afghanistan after the US withdrawal.
I really think that it is an illusion to believe that there is appetite amongst any of our partners for a continued military presence or for a military solution imposed by NATO in Afghanistan, Mr. Speaker. That idea ended with the combat mission in 2014. And I do not believe that today, I do not believe that deploying tens of thousands of British troops to fight the Taliban is an option that, no matter how sincerely people may advocate it, and I appreciate their sincerity, but I do not believe that that is an option that would commend itself either to the British people or, Mr. Speaker, to this House.
Even the Conservative former British Prime Minister Theresa May said the UK and NATO didn't do more for Afghanistan.
Now, of course, the NATO presence was always going to end at some point in time. But the withdrawal, when it came, was due to be orderly, planned, and on the basis of conditions. It has been none of these. What has been most shocking has been the chaos and the speed of the takeover by the Taliban. In July of this year, both President Biden and my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, indicated that they did not think that the Taliban was ready or able to take over control of the country. Was our intelligence really so poor? Was our understanding of the Afghan government so weak? Was our knowledge of the position on the ground so inadequate? Or did we really believe this? Or did we just feel that we had to follow the United States and hope that on a wing and a prayer it would be all right on the night? Because the reality is, if I may just make this point, the reality is that as long as a time limit was given and dates were given for withdrawal, all the Taliban had to do was to ensure there were sufficient problems for the Afghan government not to be able to have full control of the country, and then just sit and wait.
The debate came as the government outlined plans for up to 20,000 refugees from Afghanistan to be resettled in the UK. Under the scheme, up to 5,000 will come in the first year, with a priority for the most vulnerable under the country's new Taliban rulers.
No more foreign wars! No more foreign wars!
Refugee charities have welcomed the announcement as a positive first step, but say the time frame is too slow and eligibility for asylum should be expanded. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees estimates that more than 550,000 people have been displaced in the country since the beginning of the year.
When we return in just a moment, we shift our focus to Haiti, devastated by a 7.2 magnitude earthquake. That's in a moment. Please stay with us. You're still watching Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. Let's check in on Haiti now, where rescue work following the deadly earthquake which recently struck the country were hampered by heavy rains brought by Tropical Storm Grace this week. Tens of thousands of people left homeless by the quake had to decide whether to brave the storm under tents or risk returning into buildings damaged by the tremor.
Tropical Storm Grace hit Haiti on Tuesday, complicating search and rescue efforts in the country following last weekend's major earthquake. Inside a tent city, hundreds of people scrambled to repair makeshift coverings made of wooden poles and tarps that were destroyed by Storm Grace. Some took cover under plastic sheets.
The rain fell on top of us. We slept sitting down on chairs. We have nothing. We're just in God's hands.
The storm complicated rescue efforts and made it difficult to provide aid and relief to hundreds of thousands left struggling for food, water or shelter. Hospitals this week also struggled dealing with the aftermath of the 7.2 magnitude earthquake which struck on Saturday, August 14. Doctors in makeshift tents outside battled to save the lives of the many injured, including young children and the elderly.
Because of the nature of the disaster, it is an earthquake. We've had many patients. We've seen many patients that were trauma patients. So we're talking about orthopedic patients and surgical trauma patients. That's for one. So they had to be addressed urgently. Some of them had to be transferred and moved from their locality to more specialized facilities in Port-au-Prince or elsewhere.
On Tuesday, the death toll from the quake rose to nearly 2,000, but authorities warned that with about 37,312 houses destroyed, the death toll is expected to rise. In the meantime, Latin American countries including Venezuela, Chile, Mexico, Panama, Colombia and the neighboring Dominican Republic have sent food, medicine and supplies. The United States has also dispatched supplies and search and rescue teams. Haiti's latest natural disaster comes just over a month after Haiti was plunged into political turmoil by the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse on July 7th. Prime Minister Ariel Henry, who is in power until fresh presidential election can be held, has declared a month-long state of emergency, urging the population to show solidarity. Haiti has been hit by a series of natural disasters over the past years, including Hurricane Matthew in 2016. The deadliest was the 2010 earthquake, which killed more than 200,000 people and caused extensive damage to the country's infrastructure and economy.
Meanwhile, authorities say Haiti, already reeling from the recent 7.2 magnitude earthquake and lashing rains from Tropical Storm Grace, could face another deadly disaster in the coming months due to the population's low COVID-19 vaccination rate.
Haiti has reported just over 20,500 COVID-19 cases and 575 deaths so far, a low number compared to the 37 million cases reported in the US and in other countries around the world. But that could change, however, as the country battles with the aftermath of a recent 7.2 magnitude earthquake and Storm Grace. Already, the health system is overwhelmed and officials say the figures are likely to be higher than reported.
We can't even get all of our patients tested. The system to do it just isn't there. It's overwhelmed fast.
I don't believe that the number of people are less than anywhere else in the world. Because in Haiti, the people are so crowded, the population is so crowded, the way they have the public transportation, the way they live, we must have a higher contagious rate than the whole world. That's for sure.
Vaccination rates are also amongst the lowest in the world. Fewer than 1% of Haiti's 11 million residents have been vaccinated against COVID-19. Last month, the country received its first batch of 500,000 vaccine doses from the U.S. government via the COVAX Global Vaccine Program. Officials now worry that the lack of vaccinations and personal protection equipment in Haiti, as well as the likelihood that large numbers of people will be closely interacting as they seek food and shelter in the coming months, could trigger any number of super spreader events.
And finally on the program, speaking of vaccinations, in the United Arab Emirates, over 74% of the population have been fully vaccinated, while 84% have received one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. In this next report by our Dubai correspondent, Mayowa Adegoke, we learn more about one of the UAE's homegrown solution, which has helped it to the top of global vaccination ranking.
Less than 30% of the world population has been fully vaccinated. With many countries catering to local needs first, low-income countries are at a higher risk, making vaccines the most sought-after product globally. Various countries with the means are developing solutions to a global pandemic that's approaching its second year. In the UAE, Hope Consortium, a partnership between Abu Dhabi government as well as other private entities, is one of the country's solutions.
COVID is an extraordinary situation, so we needed an extraordinary solution, an approach to this.
There are so many different vaccines that you store in different temperatures.
This facility in KEZAD has the capacity to house 11.5 million doses in a freezer farm, and in other rooms, 120 million vials.
Every vaccine that's at risk is a life at risk. So our challenges are to make sure that we have the foresight to be able to see those challenges and have mitigation plans in place to address them.
In the control tower, the movement of vaccines in remotely controlled trucks is monitored. This is to ensure the integrity of the cargo, which can only be opened at the point of delivery. Another partner is using blockchain technology to secure relevant data, ensuring its integrity despite being globally accessible.
For example, if it is Pfizer, Moderna, whatsoever the vaccine, they have to initiate that, yes, we have put these number of vaccines, these number of doses, and these are the barcodes. So it's in a secure database. For me, as a receiver, as a country, let's say I'm UAE, I have to make sure that, yes, these barcodes are there, these are the vaccines, and everything is right.
VA Medica has helped to provide medical manpower.
The concept that we follow is rather to bring the vaccine to the people, not having centralized vaccine stations, and sometimes it's very difficult for people to get to certain locations. So with our tented clinic setups, we move those clinics to the dedicated areas. We then do a bit of public awareness together with your local government on the vaccine process, as well as the benefits of the vaccine. And then our medical teams and administrative teams do the necessary follow-up.
Hope Consortium says it is ready to partner with any country in need of assistance, but first the vaccines need to be available.
Well, this is where we say goodbye till next time. Remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Stay safe.